You're now watching Bad Sagacity. This week's topic: child abuse and parenting. Hello and welcome to Bad Sagacity. I'd like to start this week's topic with a warning and a disclaimer. The warning is quite simple. This week's topic, parenting and child abuse, is for mature audiences. It does cover adult themes and there is a brief discussion of child sexual abuse. Now, the disclaimer. I am in no way an expert on being a parent. In fact, I have no children of my own. I am just a student observation, and I have experience filling the role of a parent. Now, what I have to say may not be the case for most parents, but at the same time, I'd like to think there are certain things that are universal with all children. Okay, so parenting. Brief description. The skill and experience you gain from either procreating with another human or adopting a child, and at the date of birth or nearest to, you begin an active role in the new child's life. Now, please notice I did say active role, not positive role, because as we all know, there is many different types of parenting, as there are children to be parented. Now, each method has its own advantage and disadvantages, but I'm sure we can all frankly say that there are some parenting styles that are most definitely in need of some gentle assistance with the hammer of attitude adjustment and the hefty bag of knowledge. Okay, so I'm not advocating violence, but I'm not advocating these particular parenting styles either in any way. In fact, I'd like to point out 4 particularly bad abuses that can occur in parenting. Now, the first and the worst is sexual abuse. Hang in with me, because it is important to define all forms of abuse, because there are many things you would not consider abuse but are. I know this is a difficult subject. I, for one, didn't want to delve into this any further, but then I realised, unfortunately, it's necessary to discuss it for not my point, but for the knowledge of people out there. Now, there are many different forms of child sexual abuse, including asking or pressuring a child to engage in sexual activities regardless of the outcome, indecent exposure of the genitals, females' nipples, etc., with intent to gratify their own sexual desires or to intimidate or groom the child, physical sexual contact with a child, or using a child to produce child pornography. These are all the forms of child sexual abuse. For further information, I have links down below, but I also want to add the definition of child grooming, because it is a very grey area, and since it is considered sexual abuse of a child, this is also important. Child grooming refers to actions deliberately undertaken with the aim of befriending and establishing an emotional connection with the child, in order to lower the child's inhibitions in preparation for sexual activity with the child, or exploitation of the child, such as in child labour. Okay, the second is physical abuse. Physical abuse is any of the following listed here: striking, punching, belting, pushing, pulling, slapping, whipping, striking with an object, excessive pinching of the body, kicking, tripping, kneeing, strangling, headbutting, drowning, sleep deprivation, exposure to cold such as freezing, exposure to heat or radiation or burning, exposure to electric shock, placing in stress positions, tied or otherwise forced positions, cutting or otherwise exposing somebody to something sharp, exposure to a dangerous animal, throwing or shooting a projectile at, exposure to a toxic substance, infection with a disease, withholding food or medication, blinding a person or causing any impairment of sight, biting, throwing acid in someone's face, stabbing, poisoning, tickling non-consensually, rape, and last but not least, spanking. Spanking, which is subject to controversy as to whether it qualifies as physical abuse, because it generally is where a child sustains a brief momentary pain, generally on the buttocks, in which to correct an offence as a teaching aid. I don't necessarily agree with this, but hey. Now, it's important to note that physical abuse of a child is never ever considered consensual. Okay. The third and one of the more grey abuses is emotional abuse, and I say grey because there's a whole spectrum of different things that can be listed. Because emotional abuse is the hardest to define. It could include, but is not limited to, name-calling, ridicule, degradation, destruction of personal belongings, torture or killing of a pet, excessive criticism, inappropriate or excessive demands, withholding communication, routine labelling, or humiliation. Lastly, there is neglect of a child. Child abuse through neglect, which, although most of these above technically are covered by, this also allows a broader spectrum approach so that any act or series of acts of commission or omission by a parent or other caregiver that results in the harm, potential for harm, or threat of harm to a child can be considered neglect and therefore abuse. Okay, so they're the four main abuses, the most common. So this is the beginning. Just so we're all clear, these are most definitely the ones to avoid. If in fact you feel you may be doing any of these to your children, please seek help. Not just for you, but also for your child who may need other safeguards or forms of protection. Now, there are many forms of parenting, like I said, because each and every one of us has different values, beliefs, societal pressures, ethnic practices, upbringings, motivations, so on and so forth. So we are all different, and what makes it difficult is nowadays you have to kind of debate sometimes with your partner about how you believe these children should be brought up. Now, you will have two different sets of these ideals, some of them possibly conflicting, and then you come to a head, and while you're trying to figure it all out, you're suddenly in the thick of it, doing midnight feedings. And then all of a sudden it's soccer practice or dance recitals, and everything else you cherish, while the day-to-day stuff becomes a blur. But here's the thing, in my honest opinion, why with all these different ideals, values and beliefs, is there no education for soon-to-be parents, besides books and what they seek themselves? I mean, I'm not referring to Lamar's classes, where you learn about the power of breathing and practicing for what most likely will be a painful and arduous experience. I'm referring to the big stuff. Let's make it mandatory for all people to understand their responsibilities straight off the bat. Even if this only stops 3 or 4 kids from going into foster care, then isn't that worth it in the end? Isn't that what the Australian Department of Families, previously Australian Department of Child Services, trying to achieve? I mean, kids are taken so they need somewhere else, so that they have someone else to look after them for a while. And then they educate the parents in what they're doing wrong after the fact. But isn't that putting the cart before the horse? I mean, don't get me wrong, I understand the need for the system that's in place. I also understand and have the utmost respect for the people in these fields who are slaving day in, day out to ensure the best outcome for their children's sake. But wouldn't it be smarter to just give people education before they have a child? Just the basics. I mean, of course children are chaotic, and you can never be prepared for what you personally are going to experience, because, to be fair, every child is different. But even having the basics, being prepared for what is to come, being prepared for all the little things that they don't teach you, and they're no longer common sense. And a few of the things that are really important to know. These things are what some people need, but not everyone has a sturdy support network, and that's sad. Not everyone has a partner to work with, and that's sad and difficult. And not everyone has the benefit of some old wives' tales or a helping hand. And these are the people that sometimes need it the most. I'd like to advocate education for parents, soon-to-be parents. So in conclusion, I just want to start with, please, people out there, don't judge people because their kids are in care, and don't judge their kids because they are in care, as they may not have had a chance to learn any parenting skills. You never know. Let's get some education for prospective parents. I mean, decent stuff. And let's make it at least compulsory to attend the basics. And lastly, be kind to your kids. The best way to seek immortality is in the fond memories of your loved ones and the stories they tell about you when you're gone. Okay, that's all from me, Bad Sagacity. Remember, bad sagacity is just part of the learning curve. Have a good day.